I don't care what race. It's a shame when you go outside this door, walk outside this door and see people sleeping in tents like they're animals. It's sad. It's sad. And I don't even want to talk about it too much because it hurts. We're humans. We're meant to be inside, in a home, inside. Animals live outside. I'm not an animal. And neither are, You walk outside and see tents everywhere. Tents. I'm like, what the hell? What's going on out here in Oakland? What is really going on out here in Oakland? It's hard to get housing. It's so hard to get housing. The cost of living in Oakland, California is ridiculous.
This place has a way of making us think about the kind of future our young people will have.
I remember when homelessness came around. It was the early 80s. Ronald Reagan had cut the budget to these facilities. Now they're in the street. There are Vietnam vets out there. It was a national disgrace. It made the cover of Time magazine. That movie Down in Beverly Hills is all about it. It was a big deal. But slowly but surely, we got used to it. We accepted homelessness as the backdrop to urban life.
What we do here may be important, but what we leave behind is even more important.
So I have been to India, I have been to Nepal, I've been very lucky, and I have seen these kinds of scenes in those countries. And this is California 2017, and we're seeing it, and we're seeing more and more people. And those people in those tents are not necessarily the people that you would traditionally think would be homeless. They're not people that are using meth. They're not people that have severe and persistent mental illness that Reagan threw out of institutions in the 1980s. These are people who are in chronic poverty, do not have large skill sets, so cannot get work in this environment, and cannot afford to just live here, and have no family and resources in place to go. And yet, this is their community.
Y'all building up all these other places. Why don't y'all build some shelters? Why don't y'all build places for us to get off the streets? You got St. Vincent de Paul. That's not, come on now. This place is too big. It's a lot of money out here. What is it going on? What is it being spent on? Crap. To me, we need help. Go out the door. You see all these tents all around West Oakland.
I like to think actually of the people that are on the street as sort of our refugees. I think in many countries where there are refugees, they provide sanitary conditions, they provide food, they provide security, they provide infrastructure. We don't have that in many of our communities. Our homeless people are now sort of getting into these encampments that either are broken up a lot or are unsafe for the people there and for the community at large. And I think that it's really creating a refugee kind of situation in our own community.
Right, well, my story is pretty typical. My health failed. And I'm coming from this as a former business owner. The high point of my career was I became MTV's fish vendor, which lasted exactly one show because of homelessness, okay? So you make it to the top of your field and then the shit hits. And boom, all of a sudden, you're done. I was, the contract is signed for $300 an hour with MTV. And that type of exposure to what I do, I mean, that was success right there. That was almost guaranteed success in Hollywood. And boom, a disability just destroys that all. So those people who think they're secure, if you better wake up, you're not secure, Anything can go wrong at your life at any point in time and totally change your position in life and put you on the streets. And if that happens, there is nothing but abuse and torture there for you. It's designed this way purposefully so that the working class that are just one step above homelessness work the 2 and 3 jobs to still struggle. And they are not going to stop doing that because the alternative is homelessness.
guess it was the 2008, when sort of as we were entering the Great Recession, there also was an enormous growth of jobs in the peninsula, in the Bay Area, in the tech sector. And certainly over the last 7-8 years, there has been enormous economic growth in the Bay Area. With thousands of jobs have been created, but not enough housing units for the thousands of new people that have moved to our area.
We're seeing an explosion of jobs. So we're expected to see the growth of 120,000 new jobs in the East Bay alone by 2020. Unfortunately, these jobs are in two different strata. The high-wage tech and related professional jobs that we know exclude African Americans and people of color, and the low-wage, minimum-wage jobs in the service industry.
In 2013, equal employment opportunity data from Google, Intel, LinkedIn, HP, and Yahoo showed that African Americans constitute 3.8% of hired professionals, compared to 62.2% of whites, 27.1% of Asians, and 5.3% of Hispanics. Meanwhile, Asian men and women, who constitute the second largest group of tech professionals, hold only 13.9% of executive positions, compared with 80.3% in the white population. With such an extraordinary growth in the economy, an enormous amount of wealth being poured into California, why is there nothing being done about homelessness? Maybe the answer has to do with who is the predominant population of homeless people on the street.
It's just a problem. You know, it's like if you're not a white male, for example, then everything else is sort of below that. And so then we'll identify that when we get to it. But our white male population is first and foremost. So people of color, so our numbers are showing that for the most part, and this is across the nation, especially in Berkeley, that African American male dominate the homeless population. Now there's a lot of white male that are homeless, but the numbers say different when you look at it as in its entirety, that the African American male are the most impoverished. They're the most that they find on the street, and the most that stay on the street the longest, and the most that can't get a job, the most that can't get housing. You name it, they're in that category of negative. The negative column, mostly going to be African American male. And it's, yeah, I don't even know what to say about that, because it shouldn't be like that. But because we don't own anything for the most part, we're not part of the growing population, we're the dying population, and white society, for the most part, I'm not generalizing everyone, that's all right with them. So we're really not gonna help you. I'm just saying, it's so blatantly in your face.
Unfortunately, Berkeley's black population now is, the last numbers I heard was 6 or 7%. When I was growing up in Berkeley, because I've lived here most of my life, it was like 30%, 27, 30%. So we've had this huge decline in the number of African Americans living in Berkeley. Well, more than 50% of our homeless are actually African American men.
Yes, that's right. While Berkeley's African American population is less than 7%, African American men aged 25 to 60 constitute 50% of Berkeley's homeless population. Meanwhile, the statistics in Oakland are even more staggering. African American men between the ages of 25 and 60 constitute 68% of Oakland's homeless population. This begs the question, why are so many homeless people African American men?
And so this is part of the schools to prison pipeline. It's part of the end of the road for foster children. It's part of the end of the road for people who get caught up in the criminal justice system when they're young and get spit out without skills, without employment opportunities, maybe having lost touch or burned bridges with family. So this is not just
homeless, this is a huge, huge equity issue. It's about who's very, very poor and very, very vulnerable in our society.
There are 1 million African Americans in prison in this country today, 6 times the rate of whites. But just think about this. If that trend continues, 1 in 3 black men born today will go to prison.
You have to realize that in terms of homelessness, right, African Americans are the majority of the homeless people because we have always been homeless from the very beginning, 4 centuries ago. We were never allowed to own property. And meanwhile, everyone else in the country, well, white people, were given land. 3+ centuries of policies giving people land. The land grants, the Homestead Act, the VA loans, the FHA loans. They gave white people land. And now they have the land and they're rich. And their descendants are rich. And meanwhile, those of us who never had land are still homeless.
But slavery was abolished a little over 150 years ago. Surely African Americans have had a chance since that time to own land. It turns out that the story gets more complicated. There is this no small matter of something called racial wealth stripping.
In Berkeley, we've seen the decline of 35% of the African American population. In Oakland, it's been 26% decline in the past decade. The displacement map from UC Berkeley shows neighborhoods going through intense displacement. And these were predominantly African American neighborhoods of South Berkeley, North Oakland, West Oakland, and East Oakland. The displacement in these neighborhoods were by intentional design, as evidenced by the foreclosure map of Oakland. The 11,000 dots on the Oakland foreclosure map, they represent the 11,000 homes lost to foreclosures between the years 2007 and 2013. These foreclosed properties were concentrated in West and East Oakland, once the bastion of African American homeownership. The banks engaged in predatory lending activities, targeting people of color, and steering African Americans who were even eligible for traditional fixed interest loans into subprime mortgages. Overnight, these homes that were once affordable home ownership in vibrant neighborhoods quickly became unaffordable and caused the housing instability that has led to the foreclosure crisis, because under California law, the Costa-Hawkins Act, single-family homes are not protected under rent control.
Now, there's a new study that just came out. It says that in 35 years, African Americans are going to have a median net worth of $0. And then 20 years later, Hispanic Americans, Latino Americans, are going to also have a median net worth of $0. So there you have the majority of the population, African Americans, Latinos, all of whom owning no land in 50 years. So when you combine that, lack of assets, miseducation, I think it's pretty clear that sets the stage for the return of servitude.
We will make America great again. Thank you very much.
Together we can make America great again.
We will make America safe again. And yes, together we will make America great again.
Wilson, who resigned from the Ferguson Police Department, claimed he was assaulted by Brown and that he feared for his life. A grand jury and in a federal civil rights investigation declined to indict Wilson.
A surveillance camera captured a deadly confrontation between police and a 12-year-old boy carrying what turned out to be a fake toy gun.
Put your hand behind your back. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
That was how 43-year-old New Yorker Eric Garner died on July 17th after police put him in what looks like a chokehold.
do have a firearm on me.
Don't reach for it then.
Don't pull it out.
Don't pull it out.
Don't pull it out!
A jury sentenced the unrepentant racist Dylan Roof to death Tuesday for killing 9 black parishioners at a historic Charleston, South Carolina church.
On our streets! The full-on demonstration! Holy shit! Holy shit! Holy shit! Holy shit! Holy shit!
Nicholas Cruz posted racially charged messages on social media and was claimed to be a member of a white nationalist militia. According to police, Cruz confessed to killing 17 people at a high school in Florida on
Wednesday. We have failed as a society not to take better care of our brethren and our sisters. Because if we did that, we wouldn't see the conditions that we're in.
The homeless pick count is a point-in-time count, so everybody goes out on January every couple of years and just does a census of who's on the street. And this year, the census was really disappointing in the sense of it had gone up 28% in Berkeley and in Oakland. And that wasn't anything we didn't expect. It's just really disheartening when you've worked so hard for so long to see the numbers going in the wrong direction for people. So on any given night in Berkeley, there's about 1,000 people that are homeless. About 667 of them are sleeping out, like literally outside, and then the rest are sort of sheltered. We have 122 shelter beds in Berkeley. So for any one shelter bed, there's over 10 people vying for it. So obviously, what we consistently say in our field is the system is not right-sized for the need.
Oakland, California is a city of about 422,000. It has a beautiful climate, coastal city in California, and it has seen an incredible increase in its homeless population. Our point of time count that we did earlier this year saw a 25% increase in our unsheltered population. Now in Oakland, we have slightly over 2,700 homeless people without a permanent place to call home. 1,902 were actually sleeping on our streets the night that we went out and canvassed the entire city to count how many homeless we had at that moment in time. During the course of the year, that number can change, but this homelessness count is a pretty accurate snapshot of how many homeless we have in Oakland at any given moment. The visibility of homelessness has changed tremendously in Oakland and other coastal cities across the West Coast. We are seeing homeless on our sidewalks, in our parks. They're not in the shadows or in vacant buildings anymore. They are in tents, and they are setting up homes in very publicly visible places. That is one thing that our residents notice. And it certainly strikes a chord of shame to see our fellow residents living in these conditions every day.
My name is Michael Zint, and I am the founder of First They Came for the Homeless. We've been here since last Monday when we set up this intentional community. We're demonstrating for the necessity of shelter. Right now in Berkeley, the emergency shelter burned to the ground. 65 mats are not available for the homeless. And the hub, which is a centralized services, homeless services, is broken. It doesn't work. And what they did to fund the hub is they defunded a lot of the other services, so there really is nothing. So the city is taking the position that we're not allowed to have tents to protect ourselves from the elements. And that's extremely serious. 5 homeless people have died in Berkeley recently. 5. And I've got literally 4 people right now in the surrounding group that will not survive another couple of years out here. Severely disabled people.
This isn't a safe place to be.
We understand that. We agree.
Okay. So the priority here is we gotta...
That's not the priority for us. The priority for us is to live through the night not being exposed to the elements. That is our priority. Our lives are on the line. Okay? We're going to die. Do you think that gun now scares me? You think that his badge scares me? You think his handcuffs scare me? You think jail scares me? None of it scares me anymore. I weigh 95 pounds.
All right, I'm dying out here.
The police showed up at about 4:30 in the morning on the 4th of November last year. And we started the protest several months earlier, or a couple months earlier, and this was maybe the 15th or 16th raid that we had. I couldn't tell you for sure. I'd have to look up at my record. The first time they were using force was this raid. Before this point, we were able to get all their gear, and then we would move to another place. And they hated that we were doing this. They'd raid us in another place, and we'd get all their gear, and they'd move us to another place. They couldn't deal with it. And so this time they started confiscating gear. They wouldn't let us get the stuff before they were confiscating it. Cops were pulling at tents because they weren't fast enough. They were trying to get Mike Zint, who founded First That Came for the Homeless, they were trying to get him out of the tent. He has severe lung and heart issues, and he can't move that fast. And several of the people at the encampment were disabled and not able to move that fast, and they were pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
The first thing we did, the mayor and I, before we were even sworn in, we asked for a meeting with the city manager, and we said, stop it. Stop. Stop raiding this camp. It's cruel, it's unnecessary, and it's political, and it almost feels personal.
And then he grabbed my thumb, and he twisted my hand back, and I was on the ground. I couldn't even tell you how he did it. And I've got 4 cops starting to drag me back towards where there's a paddy wagon. And I'm screaming for my cane. I could not walk without my cane. And they would not give it to me, and somebody, it may have been Rat, said, we can't give it to you, you'll use it as a weapon. And they knew, every single one of those cops knew I walked with the cane and needed a cane. And so they're dragging me, and then suddenly my feet are lifted up, and they're still like carrying me like a pig on a stick or something down to the paddy wagon. Nobody has said anything to me. They're just taking me away. And then this other woman who happened to be running for congresswoman, who's also won the lawsuit against the city, whose name I shan't mention because I don't have permission, she was dealing with police trying to calm things down. And she heard me screaming, and she saw what was happening, and she stood up and said, what the hell are you doing to her? Seconds later, she was on the ground, face down into the concrete with 5 cops on top of her. And so we pass where she's down on the ground, and I'm flipping out, seeing all this going on around me. I'd never been arrested. I did lots of protests in the 60s and 70s with the Vietnam War, and somehow I never got arrested. But here I am now, I'm facing the paddy wagon, and they're trying to push me up into it. And while they're trying to push me up, they're lifting my sweatshirt higher and higher until my breasts are exposed. So now I'm screaming for my cane, asking them to let me have some dignity and walk up into the van, and please pull my shirt down so they're not exposing me.
So, since that time, I will say it took a couple of weeks for city staff. I don't think that they expected Mayor Arreguin to be the new mayor. And certainly I don't think they expected to have a brand new council that would have almost a 180-degree shift in our perspectives on how to address the homeless crisis. So you're going from working for a mayor and council who repeatedly tried to criminalize the homeless, who put ballot measures that were defeated to make it illegal to sit on the sidewalk, whose message was, those people just need to behave. As if being homeless was like a choice and a behavior issue. So you go literally from one day to the next, from a general tone of an administration that really sanctioned this idea that the homeless were bad people and that they needed a strong hand and that they were people who misbehave and they need to be
kind of put in their place, to a mayor and council who recognize that this is a humanitarian crisis, that life on the streets is a struggle, who appreciate the activism and who believe it, right? Well, it takes a little while for that big ship to kind of completely turn about. I mean, a city it's a big administration, and it takes a while for change to happen. I think people have this idea that, boom, everything should change on a dime. Well, that's kind of a Trumpian idea of how the world works. The world doesn't really work like that. You got to work with people, collaborate, and it takes a little bit of time for a big administration to move from one set of policies under one administration to an entirely new one.
Let us have tents. Let us take care of ourselves. That in itself is going to reduce drug population. That's going to reduce the mental disabilities. And that's also going to allow those people the time and the stability to work their own way off the streets without using the system. Okay, the system is overloaded, and the system is forcing you into the system, which is already overloaded. So let's ease the burden on the system and allow people to grab up some of that burden on their own. They'll deal with their own life. They'll get off the streets. Now, you set up a model that's attractive, that people want to be a part of because they see that it works, okay? Now, we're drug and alcohol free for several reasons. One of those reasons, though, that's kind of important is in this community, I've got addicts. I got recovering addicts. They don't want that around them because it makes their struggle even harder. That's key. And I also want to set up an environment where somebody who is addicted says, I'm sick of my life the way it is. I like the way they're living better, and I'm going to clean up and go. Does it work? Yeah. Within 2 weeks of this place being here, I had somebody from the Gilman Street encampment and his mother come here clean and sober. They spent the next 3 months here. They got jobs. The SSI came in. They got their money together, and they moved out of here into housing, okay? That's because we are attractive when they're ready. And this needs to be here for those people when they are ready.
The model, national model, is housing first. If you get somebody off the streets and into an apartment, you provide wraparound supportive services. It goes a long way to not just help break the cycle of homelessness, but keep people permanently housed.
Excuse me, housies is housed people. That's homeless speak. The housies don't understand homelessness. They want to do the right thing for homeless people and help them. They don't know how, though, because they don't understand. So what they're actually doing is a lot of times they're getting in the way. But a homeless-led movement has input to the local community. And if this whole thing works properly, we can influence and design it ourselves. We can influence and design something that our experience says will work. We know how to get off the streets. We know why we're not able to get off the streets. So we're fighting to put in place a structure that will allow all those people to get off the streets. Getting off the streets, first off, requires affordable housing to be built, which isn't going to happen because it's a commodity. And people need to understand what this does to homelessness. When housing is a commodity, it's an investment, okay? There needs to be future growth. There needs to be profit. Affordable housing coming in to a neighborhood could have a negative impact on their commodity investment. So the entire community is against it, naturally built into the system. It is built in to keep poor people from ever getting off the streets. And they're not going to ever put up affordable housing. Let's quit playing games. How many years have they been promising it? They're not going to do it. You're going to have to get in the streets, and you're going to have to fight. And you're going to have to go to these politicians' houses. You're going to have to target them where they live. You're going to have to up the pressure, just like we've done. You know, ask Scott Wiener how he likes us. He's a senator now. We had 3 Wiener roasts in his front yard in protest of him. First they came for the homeless. You know, we had a few actions in San Francisco because that's where we came from. But our style is direct targeted attacks for effect. And we don't target issues necessarily. We target people. We target the people who can make these decisions, because if they're not going to make the right decision, I'm going to go give them shit. And I'm going to bring a bunch of my friends with me when I give them shit. And I'm going to do it with style. And I'm going to do it with humor. And I'm going to do it without violence or vandalism, because those two things, that's not about protesting, okay? We want to create positive energy out here. And any negative action actually taints what we're doing. And that can't be allowed to happen, you know? And that's why we've gotten this far, because we force that.
I learned about these people being evicted
repeatedly these homeless people who were organized and had an intentional community. And I've been trying to find like an intentional community in California. This is a place where anyone can come in as long as they're willing to follow our rules, which are not really, we're not really asking anything very serious.
What are the rules?
There's no drugs, no alcohol, no rowdy behavior, no overnight guests, no personal stuff outside the tents. There's a good neighbor policy, which means we have to respond in a way that makes the entire local community okay with our presence.
The situation here in Berkeley has been, after the port tour, after the 17, I think it was 17 raids, which were very expensive to conduct, and these were obviously not effective in getting rid of us. There was like this uneasy truce between us and the city on this piece of property. They left us alone, and we didn't continue protesting. We turned into a passive protest at that to actually start doing what this thing was designed to do and help the homeless. So the city has visibly supported what we're doing, and as times develop, more and more of the city council members who are against sanctioning us have actually started to speak in favor of what we're doing. But I know a couple of city council members who have actively been against us, and those city council members have been working behind the scenes with BART to get rid of us.
There's a lot of space in the city that is being used poorly, and there's plenty of room for people to be. It's just that because of, all the land is already owned by someone or some group or company or the government, and so people aren't allowed to be there. Basically, we had some lawyers who volunteered to help us get a temporary restraining order to prevent BART police from clearing out this camp last Tuesday.
I could show you my tent, which is here. This is a sign that I did not make. Let's see, you can take a look inside there. It's a bag of clothes, Yeah, well, I'm a writer.
What kind of writing do you do?
All sorts, fiction, journalism, poetry. These are bikes, right? That white one is mine. I never lock that up. No one ever steals my bike. I don't have to worry about it. There's a library right here. And look at how the recycling is sorted out. This is what would you call this? Compost. Glass. We could be kicked out as soon as Tuesday night, early on Wednesday morning. So they would probably, we can't take this crap with us, not all of it. All these buckets and stuff, the shelves, it doesn't look like much, but it takes you time to build that up. We were, during the port tour, when we were getting raided, maybe a couple times a week, maybe every 2 weeks, depending on the time. It was very hard to get the basic necessities of survival because the police kept taking these things away from us. So every time we got to a new site, we'd start building up again slowly. We have plenty of pots and pans now. You can look over there. We have almost too many pots and pans. I'll show you the food. These things, we can probably get off the ground before we get raided. I bought those all at Home Depot using cash that I earned by working, me and another guy who also works. Those are, mouse-proof, vermin-proof, so we can store grains and stuff long-term in there. We got some canned food, but, there's no telling how safe it is. We got water here. There's a few sources in the community that let us refill our water jugs. And this is food donations, so even if someone's not in our camp, they can walk up and we'll give them some stuff.
This issue with the homeless encampment in South Berkeley is interesting because it popped up, and there were a group of guys, and they wanted to call our attention as a city to some of the ineffectual aspects of our homeless services. So when we took office, they had our attention. We immediately took some corrective measures. We amended some of the practices of some of the agencies they were criticizing. We opened up our own facilities. We pushed new forms of homeless housing and services. They're kind of groundbreaking in order to help more people quickly at a lower price. And so, I think we responded to the critique, which is great. And then their cause sort of evolved, right? From protesting to kind of like wanting a space to exist as homeless persons among housed people, right? And it sounds great. And we were big supporters of it. We liked the idea of an intentional community that had rules, and at one point I know they were teaching other camps how to live sober and how to get straight and how to get serious, and I wanted to do things for them to help them create wealth in their lives, right? Learn to sell things or whatever to build up themselves to have a home if they want one. So that was good. It was effective time for the community, and I think they galvanized a lot of support and they inspire a lot of people.
3 weeks ago, there was a fatality in the other encampment that had set up, which does not have rules. Okay? Now this fatality allowed, conveniently, a whole bunch of negative public opinion about us to develop and be used to, to do whatever to get that, that raid done to us too. They managed to link the two camps together, even though there's railroad tracks and, several hundred feet between us. They still managed to link it together. They brought Bart into this, and Bart did not know who we were. I'm pretty sure. They just thought we were a homeless camp. No. This is a well-organized protest with a history of being effective. We've done things that no other homeless group has ever done.
The city staff, the transit agency involved, they definitely are having a hard time differentiating between the two. And whether that's through a constitutional lens around selective enforcement, right? Because you're treating one group different than another, right? I don't know, but I think that the Here There encampment was they were definitely in the right direction and a good model for a determined community, right? Many of the Here There encampment, the First Team of the Homeless, they're senior citizens, right? And that's definitely something that is remarkable. You need to pay attention to that because that's an alarming issue that they don't have housing, right? And then the other camp, they were younger. They were there was more of an outdoor flop house, right? If it were a crack house, they'd be living inside the house in the darkness. But instead, they were outside on the lawn on this property owned by Bart, but kind of shared experience with Berkeley. We mow the lawn. They were there, and that turned really negative for a lot of people in the community, myself included. We had a suspicious death of a woman in a camp. We had a hammer assault in the face of another person. We had open air drug use. We had a fire. We had a public masturbation. It's funny. One person told me we're in the second camp. So you're right. The second camp. It highlights that sometimes homelessness is just drug addiction masquerading as homelessness.
I think there's a number of ways we can address the growth of homelessness in our city. One is we need to create more affordable housing so that people who need an affordable place to live in our city can stay in our city. We need to have policies and resources to protect people from being forced out of their homes. We're seeing a growing number of speculative evictions that are happening in Berkeley because housing is so expensive, and it's profitable for landlords to force out long-time residents so that they can get much higher rents. So we need to not just create new affordable housing, but we need to preserve existing affordable housing and prevent displacement. And so my office, working with Councilmember Sophie Hahn, we did a great deal of research about what are cities throughout the country doing to address the issue of homelessness.
In 2005, Utah had nearly 2,000 chronically homeless persons. A study released this week says there are now only 178, an unprecedented 91% drop statewide.
It's a very simple solution to a very complex issue. You put them in housing first, and then help them begin to deal with the issues that cause them to become homeless.
It costs an average of $20,000 to take care of a chronically homeless person living on the streets, but only about $8,000 a year to house and provide a caseworker for that same person.
Seattle has a new look for homeless encampments. Now, next door to this home on a typical residential street and behind this fence sits a homeless village that is now up and running.
The real estate market, both here in Detroit and around the state, is one where where purchase prices and rents are increasing faster than people's incomes are. That's a manifestation of an improved economy, but it's still a problem for us here in Detroit and in Michigan.
But there may just be one tiny solution. With homes ranging from about 23 to 37 square meters, the Cass Community Social Services Tiny Homes Project aims to be the missing link in low-income housing.
Today, the Portland City Council gave a thumbs up to so-called micro-communities. Ken Boddy asks the tough questions about whether this can really work.
These tiny houses are really the wave of the future. That's how we're going to answer our question of low-income housing.
200 square feet and built for just $12,000 each. These tiny houses would rent for as little as $250 a month.
So in conversations with our homeless service providers as well as with homeless people themselves, we developed the Pathways Project, which is our plan to address homelessness in the city of Berkeley. And the first phase of that Pathways Project is to create the Bridge Living Community, which will be on 2nd Street at Cedar Street in West Berkeley. And we anticipate will open in February. And there's 2 phases to the Bridge Living Community. The first phase is a navigation center, which is really a more robust shelter. But that's the first phase of the Pathways Project. The second phase is the 1,000-person plan. We believe it's critical to develop a long-term plan to address homelessness in Berkeley, to house the over 1,000 homeless people that are on our streets, and focusing on increasing housing for people that need a place to live.
Basically, this is where I describe what I think their plan actually is. Here's California, the West Coast, Nevada. What they're going to do is these Bay Area places, which are too expensive for us poor people, we're going to get pushed out of them into shelters in, for example, the Stockton-Modesto area, the Sacramento area, but we won't even be allowed to stay in those areas because soon those people are going to also enact more draconian vagrancy laws, in essence, so that the entire West Coast area, especially, you know, the population centers of California, become no homeless zones. And they're going to make it so uncomfortable to live on the streets, and they're going to emphatically offer that you should go into their programs. And once they get you in the programs, they're going to give you housing exits. But none of those exits are going to be in the city you were in. They're going to be, you know, some shit-ass poor people place where you get, you know, fucked up by one thing or another, some kind of chronic, you know, either air quality or violence or something like that, some kind of shit that rich people don't have to deal with. They're going to ship you out into the middle of that shit, and eventually it's, you know, you're going to be out of California altogether. You're going to be in the deserts.
So we've got people in housing that we are subsidizing at over 200% of what they earn. It's just not sustainable. So what do we ask those people to do? Don't live in your community. Where do you move to? Now, we've moved people all the way out to Stockton, Sacramento. Those markets are saturated. We're looking at moving people to Modesto and further out in order to get affordable, maybe $600 a month rental. That is astronomically changing the face of the community that we live in so that poor people can no longer afford to live in our community. I think that's really, really a terrible consequence of a housing market that only supports people who can earn over $100,000 a year, which is what they're saying is the average need to be able to get a one-bedroom in the Bay Area.
The reason a homeless sled movement is so important is, as I stated, the housed who are trying to help the homeless don't get it. They try things without consulting the homeless. Now, the homeless are homeless. We know what it's like. The housed don't know. So we know what we need to do to get there. The housed are putting these things in place, though, that literally prevent us because of that lack of understanding. Now, a homeless-led movement can bring the true issues to light from the homeless perspective, not the housed perspective. And if we can get the housed to work with us, we can start solving the problem.
The judge did not approve our request for injunctive relief, and it was partly because it was BART property. Well, several of our lawyers said that based on the judge's orders, they thought we'd have a stronger case if we went to city property, and here we are on city property. They're kicking people out who have nowhere to go, which is cruel and unusual punishment in the sense that you're punishing someone for something they can't help but doing. They're protesting, they're trying to sleep on public land, and they're told that's against the rules somehow. And if they're trying to sleep on private land, it's trespassing. So where are you allowed to sleep? And if you're telling people that they don't have a right to sleep anywhere, that's cruel and unusual punishment, right? And we're also being deprived of our right to assemble for protest. Even if they don't cite us or kick us out, they've still threatened to, and they've still tried to intimidate us into not protesting, which is insane in itself. So you can see how high this goes and how big and crazy it is, I suppose. They're trying to create a system which makes it so uncomfortable to be poor that all the poor people are forced out of this area. That's what they're implicitly doing. They're creating a no poor zone. And in order to do it, they need to undermine fundamental constitutional rights.
It is hard. The commons, the sidewalks, the parks, those are for certain uses. And there is tremendous pressure and sometimes anger that in Oakland we are allowing the encampments to remain there until we can offer them a viable place to move to. Not everyone is happy with that, but I believe that Oakland overall is a very compassionate city. I like to say that we don't step over our homeless, we step towards them. As I have gone into these encampments and spoken to the individuals there, I meet people who are currently working. They have jobs. They lost their housing. They have a job in the city, and they don't know where else to go. They need the job to pay for food and sometimes medication, other necessities, but they don't have enough income to actually afford a place to live. It is hard to believe that in a region like the Bay Area, with so much wealth, with so many resources, that we cannot figure out a solution to this moral travesty. At the same time, we do have a responsibility to return those commons to the public use. Our residents have been very patient with us and understanding that we have a plan to provide a better place, a safer and more supportive place to offer to our unsheltered residents. And until then, we are allowing them to stay, and we are helping improve the conditions of their encampments with regular cleanings, trash pickups, and in some cases, hand washing stations and porta potties. But our eventual goal is to move people off of the sidewalks because it is not healthy for anyone.
Some of our camp, which was uninterested in protesting, has gone to a safer location, which is to the south of Aquatic Park. The other group of people who left here there are now right outside 601 Ashby, which is a very large area. It's a fenced off abandoned transmission center where I believe there's 10 acres of open flatland. So we could house people very comfortably on that land for the whole of the winter, and yet we haven't been given permission. They've teased us. They've suggested it's possible, but they haven't actually gone so far as to do it.
We also have identified some empty lots that are owned by the city. We passed a state of emergency ordinance that gives us more flexibility about what we can put onto these empty lots. We are going to be putting up, we call them tough shed shelters. These are little structures. They're not intended to be permanent, but they are definitely better shelter than a tent. They will be in secured lots, and then they will have services available. People that are going to help address the health needs, the addiction needs, the mental health needs, assistance with finding permanent housing, employment, any public benefits that these people are entitled to. We want to get them help, and we know we're going to be more successful when we have gotten these people into better shelter and a safer, secured space. So we are going to stand up these tough shed shelters so that we can take these encampments and move them as a whole community. Because many of the encampments have really formed communal bonds. They operate as a community. This will allow us to move them as a whole.
Jesse Arreguín, the mayor, has released a lot of statements about how, he supports us, we're practicing, responsible community, and we're a model community, and we're so great, but he's done absolutely nothing. He hasn't called off his police force. He hasn't actually, offered us any place to be. So as far as I'm concerned, the city of Berkeley is still trying to suppress us. Instead of, we're offering solutions, we're offering help. We've been housing 25 to 30 people for 10 months at no cost to the city, and they're still trying to fight us. I don't know why. It's because we're not part of their plan.
I think it's very important to have encampments. No matter how grandiose the plans are for the pathways, I don't see that solving it in a short period of time. I think we really need to realize that we're going to need something in an interim step. And an encampment that's a model encampment that can show you and help train other encampments how to do this is what we want, what would work.
Let people have the right to feed their families. Don't make this person have to drive three Uber shifts and work at Walmart and still not have Christmas. Let's bring some real economic justice here. Let's make the American dream truly work.
This place has a way of making us think about the kind of future our young people will have. Everything we do here, we weigh on tomorrow's scales. Keeping our economy strong and free from the terrible inflation of a few years ago will bring stability into the lives of those just beginning their families. Keeping taxes down and big government under control encourage creativity and economic freedom. These will expand new employment opportunities, so important to those just leaving school for their first jobs. And keeping America strong and always searching for peace, well, nothing is more important than that. This magnificent house is 192 years old now. It stands watch on our stewardship, a guardian for future generations. What we do here may be important, but what we leave behind is even more important.